Brainstorm is one of the most powerful cards in a Legacy format. An often asked question is, why is it so powerful? Why are you not just playing other cards with more raw card drawing power? And today, we're going to take a look at Brainstorm and we're going to answer that age-old question. Why should I play this card? Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark. Every Monday, my co-host, Phil Blackman, and I do a Legacy podcast. So if you're not subscribed, you should hit that button and get on board. If you're new to the format, that's great. This is a wonderful place to start. You're in the right spot. So, Brainstorm. Brainstorm reads, draw 3 cards and put 2 cards back on top of your deck. At first blush, this looks innocuous. You're basically just trading Brainstorm for one of the top 3 cards of your deck, but the simplicity is part of the genius design of this card. So, thanks to other format all-stars like fetch lands and other cards that shuffle your deck, basically you're able to draw 3 cards and put 2 cards that you have in your hand that you don't want back on top of your deck and then shuffle them away. That's amazing. This is an incredibly powerful effect, and I can't state that enough. It's so powerful, in fact, that the entire format revolves around this interaction. This card has changed the way we build decks, the way we sideboard, the way we mulligan, and it significantly extends the ways that we build and change our sideboard in games 2 and 3. Deck construction. One thing you'll notice about Legacy is that decks are built differently than, say, Modern, Standard, or Pioneers. A glaring difference is that decks tend to have far less lands than these newer formats do. This allows you to stuff even more good cards in your deck. And the reason why we can do this is because Brainstorm exists. Knowing that you can use Brainstorm to find land 2 or 3 if your opening hand is light basically allows you to cut a few of those lands that we would normally play in formats like Pioneer or Modern. Because of this, you'll be drawing live much more often if you're playing a deck that includes Brainstorm. When building your deck, it means that you don't necessarily have to include 4 of every card in your deck, because Brainstorm, and to a lesser extent Ponder, will help you find these cards, especially if they're only good in certain situations. And speaking of cards that are only good in certain situations, you can add 1 or 2 of those cards into your deck, and if you find them in a time that you don't need them, you can shuffle them away. Okay, those are some basic reasons to play Brainstorm, but let's take a look at a scenario. Now, imagine you open with a hand that has 2 islands, 2 Misty Rainforests, a Delver's Secrets, a Brainstorm, and a Daze. At first glance, I'm not loving this hand, but what you can see here is that as we play through our turns, Brainstorm changes your hand dramatically. Let's go through those turns, shall we? Turn 1, you play an island, cast Delver's Secrets. On your opponent's turn, they play a land, pass their turn, and now it's your turn again. And now you look at your hand and you have 1 island, 2 Misty Rainforest, Daze, and Brainstorm. During your upkeep, the Delver of Secrets triggers. And what do you know? It's a Force of Will, and the Delver flips over. We call that a blind flip. Pretty lucky. You draw Force of Will on your turn. Well, that's great. Now you have a Daze and a Force of Will, but you're stuck with 3 lands in your hand. So the best play here is to play that land and see if you can't dig for something better to do on your turn. You cast Brainstorm during your main phase, and you draw another Delver of Secrets, a Murktide Regent, and a Predict. You decide the smart play is to put back the island and the other Misty Rainforest, and then you go ahead and you sacrifice your Misty Rainforest to find another island and cast another Delver of Secrets. Now your hand has Murktide Regent, Daze, Predict, and Force of Will. That's significantly better than how your opener looked. And now not only are you setting yourself up for a giant Murktide Regent, you have a way to protect your Delver with Daze and Force of Will as the game moves forward. But let's go back to the start of your turn on turn 2, and another option is to guarantee that you're going to have your Delver flip over. So during your upkeep, you can put Delver of Secrets trigger on the stack, and then cast Brainstorm and guarantee that the top card of your deck is an instant or sorcery. Look at that, you just turned Brainstorm into 2 damage. Okay, one more rewind. Let's go back to the start of turn 2, and you draw that Force of Will and you decide to play it extra safe. You play your Misty Rainforest and you attack for 3 with your Delver of Secrets. Pass the turn with 1 mana open and a fetch land. Your opponent takes their turn and does nothing of consequence. They pass back to you, so at the end of the turn, you decide that you want to cast Brainstorm as well. So, you draw Murktide Regent, Predict, and Delver of Secrets, and then you sit there and think for a second before you put those 2 cards back. Then you decide to put back the Delver of Secrets and then the Misty Rainforest. Now, on your turn, you draw Delver of Secrets, play your island, and cast Predict, and you name Misty Rainforest. And what do you know? Misty Rainforest on top of your deck. Misty Rainforest goes in the graveyard, and you draw 2 more cards. Pretty sweet, right? And your graveyard is starting to fill up. Might be time to cast that Murktide Regent soon, so you can see how it goes from there. Here's a couple other great reasons to play Brainstorm. It'll up your storm count. It'll allow you to find the rest of your combo cards, and if you're playing a deck that does rely on chaining spells to get going, this includes prowess triggers as well as storm count, it's pretty useful. Let's talk about hand disruption. If your opponent is playing cards like Unmask, Thoughtseize, or Duress, you're able to hide your best cards using the put 2 cards back on top of the deck trick. And in this scenario, you do not want to shuffle your deck, but you'd rather draw the cards that Brainstorm put back on top. This ostensibly shields you from losing your best cards to your opponent's discard. Just make sure you don't put all the counter magic on top of your deck if your opponent is going to win that turn. That would be very embarrassing, and I've certainly never done that. Another question people ask is, why should I play Brainstorm when I can just play other cards that I actually want? One of the reasons is because Brainstorm goes to the graveyard. I know that sounds crazy, but the graveyard count might not seem super important initially, but many decks rely on having cards in the graveyard. In Legacy, cards like Dragon's Rage Channeler, Check the Graveyard, Murktide Regent, and other Del spells use the graveyard as a mana source, and Snapcaster Mage allows you to cast spells from your graveyard. So having more cards in your graveyard basically means that you have more advantages. You basically have extended those cards into your hand. Now, with that said, that just scratches the top of the surface with how good this card is, and I hope I've helped answer your question. If you've gotten any value out of this, please consider liking and subscribing, and don't forget to check out the other Legacy 101 content, which I'll be updating as time goes on. We also do a weekly podcast every Monday. Also, join our Discord community. We have a great community, and everyone's happy to answer questions and help you brew and gently welcome you into Magic's greatest format. Have a good one.